Alright, I was gonna make this video when the Kayla Harrison vs. Holly Holm fight was made official, but now the UFC has had the balls to announce Jessica Andrade vs. Rodriguez. And maybe you haven't noticed, YouTube MMA creators, they're kind of going ballistic. I'm convinced Lucas Tracy is on his last straw. No, I think we're getting pretty close. MMA Guru also said that he's going to actively take over the entire UFC by UFC 400. That is his new motivation, and I, for one, am actually kind of rooting for the guy. However, I'm not going to add to the flame in terms of, wrath. I'm going to try to be a little bit more optimistic and positive here. However, I'm a human being too. I am going to rant about this. What are we thinking? UFC Brazil is in 1 month. The Guru made a great point. Why would you make this fight literally a day before you announce that UFC 301 is going to be in Brazil? That's a pay-per-view event. Rodriguez versus Andrade is an easy main card fight for that. Give it to the Brazilians, one of the worst crowds in the history of MMA that actively walked out on Glover Teixeira crying when he gave his retirement speech. Give them this fight. Don't give it to UFC 300, please. Kayla Harrison versus Holly Holm, let's just say it for what it is the last chance for the women's bantamweight division. Women's featherweight is a dead division. I actively jumped in glee when I found out that the PFL is getting rid of the women's featherweight division, because maybe that will make the UFC finally get rid of it. I am convinced the only reason that women's featherweight is still a thing is because the UFC doesn't want to be the company that doesn't have it. But ONE FC actually puts effort into it, so the UFC's not going to do it because if we're going to keep it, can we put effort into it? The fact is there's no title holder, there's no number one contender, there's no second number one contender, there's nobody ranked in women's featherweight. That's a different rant, different video. Half of the entirety of women's MMA is garbage. It just is. Women's strawweight and women's flyweight carries hard. If Juliana Pena, Raquel Pennington can become champions in your division is a joke. When you have people from ESPN actively saying that women's bantamweight shouldn't be a thing, and it falls upon people like Daniel Cormier to defend your division has failed. I didn't even know that Bueno Silva versus Raquel Pennington was for a title. When I went to the bathroom and found out that it was 5 rounds, I was like, that's for a title. These people are fighting for a title. Kayla Harrison is their last bet. That's really it. She has the delusion of Ronda Rousey. She said that she would take down Khabib in a judo match. And in all honesty, that's not that craziest thing that's ever been said. But at the same time, you have to be delusional to be a superstar. Holly Holm is basically a fossil in women's MMA. And the fact that she's still competitive kind of just proves that women's MMA has not grown at all. Or at least women's bantamweight has not grown. How does women's strawweight and women's flyweight have some of the best fights in the entirety of... Honestly, Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Zhang Weili is one of the best fights ever. If we're going to be objective here, I will give that fight in top 20 fights of all time. Of the worst selling cards in MMA history, the top 5, the top 3 of them were all headlined by Amanda Nunes, dude. That is depressing. Okay. I'm done with my rant there. We've wasted a prelim spot. We now only have one more spot on the prelims. I'm going to tell you how we fixed the main card. I've given up on the prelims. I'm convinced we blew the budget on the prelims for people like Bo Nickel and Aljamain Sterling and Calvin Kattar, Yuri Prohaska. I'm convinced we blew the budget and the UFC doesn't want to own up to that, so they're just going to put another women's MMA fight. I don't even care anymore. This is how we fixed the main event. The feature fight for it is going to be Arman Tsarukyan vs. Charles Oliveira. The next fight is going to be Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway. I can see that being under Zhang Weili versus Yao Xiaonan just because the BMF title really isn't the title. It is a way for the UFC to make a fight 5 rounds, and it's really taggy. The BMF title is a gimmick, but it's a fun gimmick. I don't really care. It's a fun fight. Next up, Yao Xiaonan versus Zhang Weili. It is what it is. I'm not even that mad about that fight. The only part that I'm kind of peeved about is the fact that Alexa Grasso offered to fight Zhang Wei Li, and I don't care what you say. Alexa Grasso versus Zhang Wei Li is the biggest women's MMA fight you could have possibly made on UFC 300, and they actively said no because they don't want to risk losing Alexa Grasso, one of their few Mexican-born champions, before Mexican Independence Day. That is the real reason. So whatever, we can do that. The co-main event is going to be Leon Edwards or Bilal Muhammad. It is almost all but confirmed. The reason that they're not going to announce it because Oil Up Dana White is going to go viral on Twitter, X, whatever. Because, brother, how have we gotten this far? I'm convinced they didn't actually plan out this card because there's just no way that you did. This is one of the sloppiest cards I've ever seen. It's not even a terrible card. It is a sloppy card. It really is. I don't think this card's going to bomb by any means, but, like, UFC 200 was planned to be a great card. Just a lot of stuff fell through before the final product. That's why it turned out pretty bad. UFC 300 was never planned to be good. Like, that's the difference. They tried to make UFC 200 great and it turned out bad. I'm convinced they're trying to make UFC 300 mid to subvert everybody's expectations. Now, the main event is where things get interesting. Let me tell you the least likely option, and let me tell you the most likely option. The least likely option is a rumor that's recently been going around. I don't personally believe this, but at the same time, we might be this desperate. According to this rumor, Dana White is going to announce a 165-pound weight class. They're going to make 170, 175, and we're finally going to get 155, 165, 175, and 185. Finally. Dude, the weight classes in MMA have annoyed me for so long because we're one of the few sports ever to not have a 165-pound weight class or at least a 160-pound weight class. Every other combat sport has it. And before you say it gets it closer to boxing, no. Let me tell you what the equivalent of boxing in MMA is. Imagine if Bellator, PFL, the UFC, and ONE FC all were under one branch just called MMA. All of the fighters fought each other. And if you became a champion at 170 pounds, you could be the UFC champion, the Bellator champion, the PFL champion, and the ONE FC champion. Then you're finally the champion of the world. And then add in another 15 weight classes for every 2.5 pounds. That would be the equivalent. We are not even close to that type of issue. Anybody says the reason that we shouldn't have a 165-pound weight class is because we don't want to be like boxing, cope harder. You don't make much sense. The main event is rumored to be Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler to kick off the 165-pound title. That's what they're going to fight for. I don't think this is going to happen, but at the same time, if there is a fighter in the UFC that the UFC would do it for, it is Conor McGregor. If Conor McGregor came out today and said, hey Dana, make a 165-pound weight class, it would be done within a week because the fans would actually be behind it. Most people want a 165-pound weight class because there's a lot of fighters like Gilbert Burns, Colby Covington, Robert Whittaker even, that would do... Actually, not Robert Whittaker, that was a bad example. Gilbert Burns and Colby Covington that would do good in that type of weight class, 165 pounds. That it would actually be an interesting division. Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler for the title of the 165-pound weight class. We did a similar thing to Ronda Rousey. It would be stupid, but at the same time, I wouldn't even mind it, because let's save this card. What is the most likely option? Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya to headline the card. Let me explain. So, Dricus du Plessis, and I will give him credit where credit is due. It is a Chad move to look like what he looks like right now and say, yeah, I'm ready to go for UFC 300. That's a Chad move right there. I'll give him some respect. Dricus du Plessis wants to fight Israel Adesanya. Israel Adesanya is coming off a weird injury, which is kind of ironic because we did the same thing to Dricus, wanting him to fight on semi-short notice after breaking his hand. But then we, trashed Dricus for not doing it. But for Israel, it's okay, you get better. Like that's a crazy double standard, but whatever. Israel Adesanya. So what has come out is the management of Dricus du Plessis has made it official that he reached out to the team of Israel Adesanya and asked him, would you be down for making UFC 300? Dricus is ready to go. They need a main event. Israel Adesanya's team said they would be able to make this turnaround. He is starting to recover from this injury. He could make this turnaround. Please. So, in recap, this is your card. Main event opener, Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan. Next up, BMF title fight, Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway. Next up, Zhang Weili versus Yao Xiaonan, whatever. Co-main event is Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad, and the main event is Israel Adesanya versus Dricus du Plessis to defend the middleweight title. The reason why I'm so confident in this is, let's be real, Israel Adesanya was always going to come back into a title fight because they pay him too much. The UFC fucked up. Israel is on a crazy good contract, making 7 figures every fight that he's in. The reason why I'm so confident in that is because for the second Robert Whittaker fight, they announced the fight, said it was the main event, without actually getting Israel to sign that fight was official. That is an astronomical F-up by the UFC, and what Israel decided to do, and has made this very public, is he played hardball and got a new contract where he made exponentially more money as the champion to fight Robert Whittaker in the second fight. Israel became a superstar to the UFC when they contractually had to pay him 7 figures for every fight that he's in. And that is why Israel gets the special treatment. Not because the UFC loves Israel Adesanya, not because he's a particular fan favorite, no. Because the UFC has to pay him more. You cannot make him anything other than a main event. He has to fight for the title to get a chance at making that money back that you have to pay him. That is how you know who's going to be fighting where on the card. Look at how much they have to pay them. That is your main event. That is how you save UFC 300. I'm not even going to bother with the prelims. Guru did a better job in that in his video. He gave a good example of how to fix the prelims. I'm going to tell you how to fix the main card. And that is how you fix UFC 300. At least as much as you can. Tell me, would you buy this card? Is this card worth the $75 to $85 that you're paying for this? Honestly, I've lost track of how much they're escalating the prices of this. It's just ridiculous, dude. Tell me what you think in the comment section below. I just wanted to hop on, do a caffeine-fueled rant for you guys. Entertainment. I hope you guys enjoy this video. And with that out of the way, adios, guys.